Message from our CEO, Andy Jassy. Strengthening our culture and teams. Oh boy. If you didn't know, I actually did work at Amazon, and not just when I was at Twitch. I was an Amazon intern all the way back in 2015. So I have a lot of thoughts on Amazon's culture, the way they run things, and how the experience is as a person working there. So it's going to be an interesting read. Do you know what else is interesting, though? Today's sponsor.
Hey man, people are getting timeouts on the... I know, it's Puppeteer again. Look, I'm fixing it. I can help with that. Who are you? Yeah, who are you? Doesn't matter. Browserbase is what you need. Oh man, another ad. Browserbase is the world's most reliable headless browser. You can connect directly with Playwright, scan the web with LangChain, and get data from wherever you want. Oh, and it works great with serverless. I've had so many Lambdas crash from Playwright. Never again. Thank you to Browserbase for sponsoring this video. If you want a headless browser and watch this channel, they're probably what you're looking for.
Let's get to it then. Message from CEO Andy Jassy. Strengthening our culture and teams. This is very interesting, especially when you consider like layoff culture and all the stuff that has been going on in the industry as a whole lately. When were the last Amazon layoffs? Come on, Amazon. Yeah. There's been a bunch of random chunks of layoffs throughout. There were 2022, 2023, a whole bunch. But yeah, this confirms the weirdness of how Amazon is doing layoffs. And I do have thoughts on this because it sucks. The one and done layoff where it's like, okay, we're downsizing, we're cutting this many people, you'll have an email if you're still here by this time. Does that suck? Absolutely. At the very least, you get to like be done with it. It's the whole rip the Band-Aid off thing. The thing that sucks here is that you never know when you're done ripping Band-Aids. You don't know after the layoffs if you're just going to get hit in a few weeks or not, which just destroys the morale of the team. And I've seen this. I've talked to a lot of people who are at Twitch right now, and they got hit with 2 separate waves of layoffs. And then some teams got hit with a separate third one as well. And that just destroys morale because you have these people that survived the first layoff wave with you that you've gotten close with after getting through it. And then it just happens again. And I do think some amount of why this change is happening is as an alternative to doing layoffs, because you have to give stipends when you lay someone off. You have to give them something. But when you convince them to quit, you don't have to give them anything. Anyways. Hey team, I wanted to send a note on a couple changes we're making to further strengthen our culture and teams. First, for perspective, I feel good about the progress that we're making together. Stores, AWS, and advertising continue to grow on a very large basis. Prime Video is continuing to expand, and new investments in areas like GenAI, Cooper, what the hell is this? Project Cooper, Global, they're competing with Starlink. Today I learned. Healthcare, okay, their healthcare is fine. I'm actually using One Medical right now. It's been good so far, as well as several others, evolving nicely. At the same time we're growing and inventing, we're also continuing to make progress on our cost structure and operating margins, which isn't easy to do. Overall, I like the direction in which we're heading and appreciate the hard work and ingenuity of our teams globally. When I think about my time at Amazon, I never imagined I'd be at the company for 27 years. My plan, which my wife and I agreed to on a bar napkin in 1997, was to be here a few years and then move back to New York City. Part of why I stayed has been the unprecedented growth. He started when they were at $15 million of annual revenue, and now they're going to be over $600 billion. The perpetual hunger to invent, the obsession with making customers' lives easier and better every day, and the associated opportunities these priorities present. This is all fluff, sure, but something I do want to emphasize as an ex-employee is the depth at which the obsession with customers is real. To this day, I don't think I've ever worked somewhere that was so willing to throw everyone and everything under the bus to try and do anything that makes the customer's life slightly better. Amazon has, to a fault, committed to this, and I think it's a huge part of why they've been as successful as they are. We'll probably touch more on the Amazon values going forward, but I want to read through this first. There's a lot of other fun things I want to touch on too, like Emily's thread all about this, but we'll get there. Being so customer focused is an inspiring part of it, but it's also the people that we work with, the way we collaborate and invent when we're at our best, our long-term perspective, the ownership I've always felt at every level I've worked. Apparently he started as L5. So for context on levels at Amazon, when you're a fresh grad software dev out of college like I was, you start at L4. L5 is the role between like junior and senior. It's like you're not fresh, but you're not quite ready to be senior yet. L6 is senior, L7 is principal, L8 is staff, etc. L1 through 3 is reserved for things like drivers, workers in warehouses, stuff like that. I believe interns are technically L4, not positive. But yeah, so starting at L5, so starting literally just above where I was when I started, literally where I was at Amazon about a year in, and climbing all the way to CEO, that is a cool thing. Most CEOs don't climb there from a low-level entry point. They might get hired in as like an exec and then become CEO. But the experience of starting at this low of a level and climbing up is very rare. I believe Satya Nadella was similar. No, he joined as a vice president in Microsoft Central in 2000. So not even Satya. That grind is nuts. Good work for Jassy. He was also the CEO of AWS for a while too. Although after that, I have to call these two out. The speed at which they make decisions and move, Amazon does not move fast anymore. They do not move fast at all. The bureaucracy bit's kind of real. Like they skip over a lot of the stuff that you see at like a Google or a Microsoft. And the focus on like short docs is cool too, but I don't want to spend this whole video just talking about Amazon culture. Speaking of which, our culture is unique and has been one of the most critical parts of our success in our first 29 years. But keeping the culture strong is not a birthright. You have to work at it all the time. When you consider the breadth of our business, their associated growth rates, the innovation required across each of them, and the number of people we've hired in the last 6 to 8 years to pursue these endeavors, it's pretty unusual, and it will stretch even the strongest of cultures. Strengthening our culture remains a top priority for the S team and me, and I think about it all the time. That's such a weird sentence, the and, comma, I think about it all the time. Robot. We want to operate like the world's largest startup. This means having a passion for constantly inventing for customers, strong urgency for most big opportunities. It's a race. High ownership, fast decision-making, scrappiness, and frugality. Deeply connected collaborations. You need to be joined at the hip with your teammates when inventing and solving hard problems, and a shared commitment to each other. This bit here about the world's largest startup, again, I would say this is one of the things I think Amazon does quite well. We're at a point now where tools are too good to have your teams separated based on points in your technical stack. Having your back-end team, your front-end team, your mobile team, your support team, your sales team as these separate groups based on the role rather than the vertical you're solving. Like, why would somebody who's selling to vendors on Amazon be on the same team as somebody selling AWS infrastructure? They're both sales, but if you put them under the same manager, you're stupid. Amazon was one of the earlier companies to go all in on the vertical slices model, where instead of there being a sales team that covers everybody or a back-end team that covers everybody, there were individual small vertical teams for each of the different things Amazon was doing. So rather than thinking of this as Amazon being the world's largest startup, think of it as a bunch of smaller startups that compose all of Amazon. There's the team focused on AWS as a whole, but then within there's a bunch of smaller teams building all of the individual products for AWS. That strategy works a lot better if you're trying to compete with these other startups and these other companies in the space. And the only way a big company can even stay at the same pace as a startup is if they have smaller teams internally doing things like this. And when I was at Twitch, we did a lot of this too. We had these small vertical slice teams focused on very specific things. Two areas the S team and I have been thinking about the last several months are the following. First, do we have the right org structure to drive the level of ownership and speed that we desire? And two, are we set up to invent, collaborate, and be connected enough to each other and our culture to deliver the absolute best for customers and the business that we can? We think we can be better on both. On the first topic, we've always sought to hire very smart, high judgment, inventive, delivery-focused, and missionary teammates. Also mostly true. I mentioned before customer obsession. Ownership is a big one too. You don't say like, that's not my job, I'm not doing it. I don't think I ever heard that in my time there. Our right, a lot's a fun one. The goal with this one is that we hire people who, if they feel strongly about something, it's more likely than not true, but also learn and be curious right after, which means you're okay with being wrong and learning from it. This is the one I was looking for. Have backbone, disagree and commit. This phrase has haunted me now for like almost a decade. I've went from loving it to hating it back and forth constantly, settling at an okay spot with it. Leaders are obligated to respectfully challenge decisions when they disagree, even when doing so is uncomfortable or exhausting. Leaders have conviction and are tenacious. They do not compromise for the sake of social cohesion. Once a decision is determined, they commit wholly. This is an interesting one. I think this is both like one of the strengths and weaknesses of Amazon, where like when there's a disagreement on something, they don't recommend how you settle the disagreement. They just say, pick one. So if there's like one person who is the main owner of the project, somebody who's maybe even higher up but doesn't own the project, and they disagree on a way to do the thing, the person who owns it says, sorry, I own it. We're doing it this way. And the other person just kind of says, okay, sure. On one hand, this keeps small disagreements, even medium-sized disagreements, from delaying meaningful progress. But on the other hand, it results in slow, like piles of resentment building up throughout. And I definitely felt that, not as much at Amazon as I did at Twitch, but the disagree and commit keeps you from getting stuck in the mud at the cost of potential damage in the social cohesion layer, as they say here. So it's interesting. Yeah, the don't go in the middle is a really good point as well. Like if you stop in the middle and compromise, that's not ideal for anyone. You need to just pick one of the options. The solution can be you disagree until you agree that like one thing might be right. It could be that you A/B test it or something like that. But for the most part, you need to just pick one of the options and go all in on it. Amazon's not a big company on things like A/B testing. Back to the article. As we've grown our teams as quickly and substantially as we have in the last many years, we've understandably added a lot of managers. In that process, we've also added more layers than we had before. It's created artifacts that we'd like to change. For example, the triple pre-meeting for the decision meeting, a longer line of managers feeling like they need to review a topic before it moves forward, owners of initiatives feeling less like they should make recommendations because the decision will be made elsewhere, etc. Ooh, this one hurts. The not feeling like you should even say something because you're just going to be ignored because someone else making the decision. Oh God, that hurt me real bad at Twitch. Most decisions we make are two-way doors, and as such, we want more of our teammates feeling like they can move fast without unnecessary processes, meetings, mechanisms, and layers that create overhead and waste valuable time. Look at that, founder mode. So we're asking each S-Team organization to increase the ratio of individual contributors to managers by at least 15% by the end of Q1 2025. This can have benefits and negatives. I was on a team once where when I joined the team, I was one of the 2 employees that the manager managed. By the time I was leaving that team, that manager was in charge of like 25 people. He had more directs than almost anyone else at the company. And it was great. He was wonderful. I learned so much from that manager. But I've had other times where the manager was only managing like 4 people and they were much more hands-on, which was cool because like we could chat more, but it wasn't necessarily beneficial. And that person wasn't necessarily spending their time in as valuable of away. And this is also, to be clear, not every manager needs to have 15% more people. So if you currently have 3 people, now you need to have 3.3 people. That's dumb. They know that. But overall, things need to shift in that direction. So if you're a team with 4 people, maybe you bump to 5. If you're a team with 10 people, maybe you bump to 12. And averaging out overall, see that 15% bump, which I think is fair. It also means managers will be doing 15% less work per person, which hopefully will unblock people more. Having fewer managers will remove layers and flatten organizations more than they are today. If we do this work well, it will increase our teammates' ability to move fast, clarify and invigorate their sense of ownership, drive decision-making closer to the front lines where it most impacts customers, decrease bureaucracy, and strengthen our organization's ability to make customers' lives better and easier every day. I hate these giant sentences with the like comma, comma, comma with like full sentence points. They're working to complete these goals over the next few months. That means they're laying off more managers. So now managers get to be the ones scared. Oh boy. To be clear, companies need process to run effectively, and process does not equal bureaucracy. But unnecessary and excessive process or rules should be called out and extinguished. I'll read these emails and action them accordingly. Apparently, this is because he created a bureaucracy mailbox for examples where there are things that are blocking people from making shit happen. That's kind of cool to have a place people can send their complaints like, hey, I had 3 meetings for this thing that shouldn't have had a meeting. I would have abused that, actually, now that I think about it. That's a cool idea. To address the second issue of being better set up to invent, collaborate, and be connected enough to each other and culture. Yeah, that's a fucking sentence. The second issue is getting better set up. I'm not going to even try to read this. It's a mess. So we're going to return to being in the office the way that we were before the onset of COVID. Here's the big news. We look back over the last 5 years, we continue to believe the advantages of being together in the office are significant. I've previously explained the benefits, as he did in a post in February, of last year. But in summary, we've observed that it's easier for our teammates to learn, model, practice, and strengthen our culture. Collaborating, brainstorming, and inventing are simpler and more effective. Teaching and learning from one another are more seamless, and teams tend to be better connected to one another. If anything, the last 15 months we've been back in the office at least 3 days a week has strengthened our conviction about the benefits. This is also an interesting point, and also where people are going to start getting mad at me. To be clear, I don't think working from home makes you individually less capable of contributing code to solve a specific problem. I do think it means that planning gets more difficult around those things, and you have to have more processes, more communication methods and styles, and more management in order to make sure people are moving in the right direction, because it's a lot harder to know if somebody's going the wrong way if the friction for talking to them about it is as high as a Slack message. And I know that sounds silly, like it's just a Slack message, but that is very different from turning to your side and saying, hey, how's the work going on that? And the casual conversations, like the most value I got out of Twitch, and the reason that this whole channel exists is because I missed having those really fun, deep lunch and dinner conversations about all sorts of random stuff in tech. Help me sure we're working on the right things. It let me level up a whole bunch by talking with people smarter than me about things I didn't understand. It gave me an opportunity to just nerd out about stuff that I lost when COVID hit, and this channel ended up coming out of that. The in-person casual conversations are a huge benefit to the individuals and to the company, and I can see why people, especially business leaders, want that. Because if you want to retain your employees, you want to have your employees get better every year, and you want to be able to justify promoting them, giving them raises, and seeing them make more impact. In person makes seeing that easier, it makes feeding into that easier, and it makes growth significantly easier. So I understand. That said, when growth isn't the focus on an individual level, instead delivery is, being able to lock in at home, just sit down with my laptop and code out a solution to a problem that's well-defined, that is a lot better than being distracted in the office trying to do the same thing. And I can say 100% certainly, the best code I've written was not written in a goddamn office. It was written in my room or on my couch, on my laptop, or in the shower in my head that I then went and wrote out right after. So there's a balance to be struck here. And I honestly kind of liked the 3-day-a-week thing because it lets me go lock in at home 2 days a week. But I'm very curious to see how this ends up going for them. Before the pandemic, not everybody was in the office 5 days a week, every week. If you or your child were sick, if you had some sort of house emergency, if you were on the road seeing customers or parents, if you needed a day or two to finish coding in a more isolated environment, people would work remotely. This was understood, and it will be moving forward as well. Before the pandemic, it was not a given that folks could work remotely 2 days a week, and that will also be true moving forward. Our expectation is that people will be in the office outside of extenuating circumstances, like the ones mentioned above, or if you already have a remote work exception approved through your S-team leader. And here's where it crumbles. Yeah. The problem with this is you're going to churn a lot of your best engineers. To be fair, that might be a specific goal because the engineers who have been around the longest, who are going to be the most insistent on getting to stay at home now they have a taste of it, they also would have the highest severance in separation. And they would also be the ones that look the worst if you lay them off. But if you can get them to quit, you don't have to pay them the severance. And then you can replace them with people who are a lot cheaper because the market's like rates for hiring engineers are a lot lower at the moment. And then skill them up because everybody's in office again. That's a financially good thing to do. It sucks. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to be losing their favorite coworkers. But I get the, like as in an Amazon investor, and okay, I've only bought Amazon stock to replace stock that I sold through transfers because I was an employee. And I'm still holding a good bit of Amazon stock. I see why as a shareholder they would want to do this. But as a person who worked there, this sucks. This sucks hard. I would never have, like at Twitch, even pre-COVID, I was working remote 1 to 2 days a week. I just would call in for my first meeting always. I never showed up for my first meetings if they were before noon. I would call in from bed because I have a degenerate sleep schedule. Show up for the free lunch, have my favorite thing, which is the lunch conversations with my fellow nerds. Go to whatever meetings, try to get some work done on my desk, fail outright, have my free dinner, go skate for like 4 to 6 hours, get home between 10 p.m. and midnight, and then code till 3 a.m, restart the next day. And in many ways, honestly, I kind of miss that. But this feels like a push away from that. And I have feelings. I'm scared that like the next Theos might not be able to work at an Amazon-like company if it changes this way. They're bringing back the assigned desk arrangements in locations that were previously organized that way, including the US headquarters locations. Okay, did they not do that already? So like if you did go to the office, you didn't have a dedicated desk. I cannot imagine like sure, cubicles are one thing, but I need a desk that I can leave my things on and they'll be there when I show up the next day. That is chaos. This might make the shift worth it, actually. If the 5 days also means you can have a desk again, that's going to make things significantly less awful. God, I can't even imagine working in an office 3 days a week and not having a dedicated space. God, that sounds terrible. We understand that some of our teammates may have set up their personal lives in such a way that returning to the office consistently 5 days per week will require some adjustments. To help ensure a smooth transition, we're going to make the new exceptions active on January 2nd, 2015. Want to thank our leaders and support teams in advance for the work. Nonsense. I want to read this thread from Emily, though, because this seemed very interesting. We want to operate like the world's largest startup. So we're going to require everyone to be in an office every day like it's 1958 is a choice. I will say more and more startups are going in the direction of all in person, when we had to do our layoffs at the beginning of 2023, well, honestly, it was end of 2022. When we had to do those, we went from mostly remote to mostly in office. By that, I mean, it was literally just Mark and me, and we lived in the same place. And that was a nice change to be able to like talk to the person who is responsible for everything else with them just there, especially because we live together. It was nice. Mark could hold me accountable a lot more easily. But we also have Julius, who's remote. And the amount of messages in our group chat is just insane. And there is absolutely a future where I want to like move him here because it will absolutely make things faster for us as a startup. And I do see more startups going the in-office direction. So I don't necessarily agree with that comment. We're asking each S-team organization to increase the ratio of individual contributors to managers by at least 15% by the end of Q1. It's a fascinating way of saying a bunch of managers are going to get demotions. I don't think it's necessarily demotions. I think layoffs are more likely, honestly. But also, I know a lot of people who became managers, not because they wanted to manage people, but because it was the only way to keep growing. And if they can transition back to IC, maintaining their current pay, ideally also maintaining their current level, that could be really helpful. That could make a lot of people quite happy. I know people at Twitch that did not want to be managers that were because it was the best growth method for them. If they had the option to not be a manager anymore, I know a lot of people who would take that. So I don't necessarily agree with that point. It is fair to call out that being a manager is wildly different from being an IC. So these people are going to have to prove they still have these skills for IC work. How's that going to play out? Amazon has a really strong PIP culture. If you're not familiar with a PIP, it's a performance improvement plan. It means if you're underperforming and your manager identifies it, they don't just immediately fire you. Immediate firing is reserved for egregious violations of things like breaking rules, causing problems at the office, stuff like that. So when you're put on a performance improvement plan, it says you're not meeting expectations. We need to see improvement over the next month or you get fired. They often come with an option of, or you can quit and we'll give you a 3-month stipend. And then you can have that money as you go find a different job. And you don't have to say you got fired because you technically quit. Oh yeah, IC is individual contributor for those who don't know what it stands for. Should have clarified that before. I do like this point from Aaron here. Managers should keep their individual contributor skills warm, even if not coding every day. This should not be controversial. If you're going to be an engineering manager, you should know how to do engineering. Same as with most other managerial jobs. The accounting manager can still do accounting if needed. I absolutely agree with this point. I talk about this a lot in my coverage of hiring stuff. I go on a long rant in my founder mode video if you're curious to hear more. But TLDR is I think people are too aggressive to hire for positions in roles they don't want to do. Like if you hate doing support or sales and you're a founder of a company, it's almost intuitive to go hire a support person and a salesperson so you can stop worrying about it. That is the wrong method. Good managers deeply understand the work their employees are doing, not just what they're individually working on at that moment, but the field they're working in and the ways to deliver. Good managers are people that the employees can look to for help and guidance in tough situations and feel understood by. And if you haven't coded in 8 years, you do not understand me as an engineer. And if I stop coding, I will be a terrible manager for my team. It's one of the many reasons I try to code as often as I possibly can. I don't think I have too much else on this one. Appreciate Emily for the additional context. Appreciate Andy for writing this. This definitely wasn't an AI article. Interesting one regardless. That's it. Peace, nerds.